Carl Jung documented why people with what we now call empathic abilities face a cruel psychological paradox. Their greatest gift becomes the source of their deepest pain. He discovered that empathic individuals unconsciously attract people who project their shadow onto them. People who resent the empath's emotional freedom because it reminds them of their own emotional numbness. Jung found that the more authentic and radiant someone with highly developed feeling function becomes, the more they threaten others' psychological defenses. What Jung called shadow projection creates a pattern where empaths are simultaneously sought after and secretly despised for possessing what others have lost or buried within themselves. Today, I'll reveal Jung's most disturbing discovery about empathic psychology and why he believed this pattern either destroys sensitive individuals completely or transforms them into exactly what humanity needs for its emotional evolution. The pattern that revealed Jung's most chilling insight emerged from multiple cases he observed in his clinical practice. Individuals with extraordinary empathic abilities who seemed to magnetize people that would eventually turn against them with inexplicable hostility. Jung consistently documented what I call luminous emotional authenticity in these patients. They could sense others' pain instantly, respond with genuine compassion, and create safe spaces where people felt truly understood for the first time in their lives. Yet every close relationship followed the same devastating pattern. Jung's observations revealed these individuals draw others to them like moths to flame, yet these same people develop unconscious resentment toward the very qualities that initially attracted them. It is as if their light exposes shadows others cannot bear to acknowledge. People would confess their deepest secrets to them, find healing in their presence, and experience profound emotional relief. Then, without warning, they would begin to criticize them, undermine their confidence, and eventually abandon them entirely, often blaming them for being too intense or too much. Jung realized he wasn't observing simple relationship dysfunction. He was witnessing what happens when unconscious people encounter someone who has maintained connection to their authentic feeling function. The pattern Jung documented would become one of his most important insights into human psychology. Authentic emotional expression triggers unconscious shame in those who have betrayed their own emotional truth. If you've ever been criticized for being too emotional or too intense, write this in the comments. My empathy is not too much. Others are too numb. Jung's observations of this phenomenon led him to identify what modern psychology now recognizes as psychological mirroring theory. When individuals with highly developed feeling function interact with emotionally disconnected people, they unconsciously reflect back the emotional authenticity those people have abandoned. Jung's research revealed that most people disconnect from their authentic emotions early in life as a survival mechanism. They learn to suppress sensitivity, hide vulnerability, and operate from false personas that gain social acceptance but cost them their emotional aliveness. What I call the authenticity wound shows how people who have cut themselves off from genuine feeling develop unconscious hostility toward those who haven't. The empath's natural emotional expression becomes a painful reminder of what they've lost. Jung observed that what we now call empaths fall into what I term the mirror trap. Their authentic presence automatically triggers others' repressed emotions and buried pain. This creates intense discomfort in people who have built their entire identity around emotional numbness. The person caught in this dynamic experiences what I call projection amplification. They unconsciously blame the empath for making them feel emotions they've spent years avoiding. The empath becomes responsible for pain that existed long before they entered the picture. Jung noted something even more disturbing. People often seek out those with empathic gifts specifically because their unconscious recognizes what they've lost. They're drawn to the emotional aliveness they observe, yet simultaneously resent it because it exposes their own emotional death. This creates what Jung identified as the fundamental psychological paradox affecting sensitive individuals. Jung's most disturbing discovery about empaths was how they become targets for what he extensively documented as shadow projection, where people unconsciously transfer their own rejected qualities onto the empath, then attack them for possessing these very traits. Through his analytical work, Jung found that people who resent empaths are actually resenting parts of themselves they've disowned. The empath's emotional sensitivity reminds them of their own buried sensitivity. The empath's authenticity exposes their own falsehood. What makes this particularly cruel is that empaths often possess the exact qualities these people once had but learned to suppress. Jung observed, "The individual attacks in the empath what they have killed within themselves." The resentment is not toward the empath, it is toward their own abandoned emotional truth. This creates what I call the innocence-punishment dynamic. People who have lost their emotional innocence through trauma or social conditioning unconsciously punish those who have managed to preserve theirs. Comment below if you've attracted people who later turned against you for no clear reason. I recognize shadow projection when I see it. Jung documented how this manifests in subtle but devastating ways. People will criticize empaths for being too sensitive when they themselves wish they could feel deeply again. They'll mock empathic responses as naive when they've simply become cynical to protect themselves from pain. The most insidious aspect is that these attacks often come disguised as concern or advice. You need to toughen up. The world will eat you alive. You're too trusting. These statements reveal the speaker's own emotional wounds while attempting to dim the empath's light. Jung realized this wasn't conscious malice. It was unconscious self-hatred being projected outward onto someone who represented what they could no longer access within themselves. Through his analytical work with empaths and their relationships, Jung identified 4 distinct patterns of how people unconsciously attack empathic individuals for their authentic emotional expression. Type 1. The emotional critic. Jung documented people who specifically target empaths' emotional responses. These individuals have learned to suppress their own feelings so completely that witnessing authentic emotion triggers unconscious shame about their own emotional deadness. What I call feeling police are people who constantly tell empaths their emotions are wrong, excessive, or inappropriate. They've internalized the message that emotions are weakness and project this belief onto empaths. Type 2. The authenticity attacker. These individuals unconsciously resent empaths for being genuine because they've built their entire identity around false personas. Jung observed how people who live behind masks feel threatened by those who don't need masks to survive. What I term the performance police criticize empaths for being too real or inappropriate when they simply haven't learned to hide their authentic selves behind social facades. If you've ever dimmed your authentic self to make others comfortable, comment, "I will no longer shrink to fit their emotional limitations." Type 3. The vulnerability violator. Jung noted people who specifically target empaths' openness and trust. These individuals have been hurt so badly that they've closed their hearts completely, and they unconsciously punish empaths for maintaining emotional availability. What I call the trust destroyers are people who take advantage of empathic openness, then blame empaths for being too trusting rather than acknowledging their own betrayal of that trust. Type 4. The light dimmer. The most dangerous type Jung encountered were people who systematically work to diminish empaths' confidence in their own gifts. They've disconnected from their own inner light so completely that others' radiance becomes unbearable. What I term the brightness reducers use subtle psychological manipulation to convince empaths that their natural empathy is a problem to be fixed rather than a gift to be honored. Comment if you've realized that others' resentment of your sensitivity reveals their own wounds. Their attacks on my light expose their inner darkness. Understanding your specific pattern is crucial because each type requires different strategies for what Jung called the protection of authentic self. Jung identified 3 specific dangers that made this psychological dynamic a serious threat to both individual empaths and collective emotional evolution. Danger 1: the authenticity erosion. Jung observed that constant exposure to resentment and criticism causes many empaths to begin doubting their own emotional reality. They start suppressing their natural responses to fit in with people who can't tolerate authentic emotion.